Good evening, everyone. What a fantastic crowd. Yeah. We haven't been here for a little while, and all of you really came. You're like, where have we been? Here we are. So glad to see you. You guys, this is our 18th Flights and Rights, right? So this is going to be the last one for 2018 in Seattle. But we actually have one more this year in Spokane. So if you're going to be in Spokane on December 11th, I'm just saying, we're going to be doing one. And it's going to be great because we're going to be talking about some of the issues in the criminal justice system there around behavioral health issues and the services and treatment that are not being offered to people who are incarcerated that needs to happen. And so we're going to have a great community panel there. So if you're either going to be in town or if you have relatives or friends who are in Spokane, let them know about it because we want them to come out. Okay, so I'm Michele Storm. I'm the Deputy Director at the ACLU of Washington, and I'm so thank you. I love you guys. It is so great to be with you again, and we have so much to do. So before I dive in, a couple of things. I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that we are in the land of the Duwamish and the Coast Salish people. Okay, so our country was really founded on some of the theft of the land and the livelihood of those folks, and there's a lot of repair work to do, and it's important for us to acknowledge that because it is a part of this fight that we're all in for justice for all people. And it's interesting because our topic this evening relates to immigration. And you know, it's a funny issue when you think about it. Who was here first? Who's coming? Who has rights? Who has determined what rights should be? So we're going to be looking at some of those issues. But what I want to also say before I get into any additional context is that us being here, this being our 18th time here with you, us being in this conversation about our civil rights and our civil liberties, us being able to keep doing this work has a lot to do with you showing up too, with your persistence and our persistence, our joint persistence in doing this work. So much is happening. We're very shortly going to have a new legislative session in Olympia with lots of bills that are going to impact our rights in this state. The new Congress in Washington, the other Washington, is soon going to be seated, right? We have a brand new, yeah, I know, and it's not bad. It's not bad. But on the maybe less good side, we also have a brand new Supreme Court justice since the last time we were together. And this is a person whose record raises a lot of concerns for us that care about civil rights and civil liberties. So, and then also, gosh, you know, we used to talk about our old Mr. Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, and now he's gone. And we have this Matthew Whitaker person who also makes us feel a little bit edgy, so about what's possible. So there's a lot of work to be done, and this is no time to slow down. So part of what makes me feel so good about seeing such a huge crowd here tonight is that that's exactly what we have to do. We have to keep coming together, and we have to keep doing the work that we need to get to do together. So, as usual, we are live streaming on our ACLU of Washington Facebook page, so you can go ahead and text your friends and tell them to check it out there. And if you're posting on any of your social media outlets, use that hashtag ACLU Flights, and then you can share with us and each other. It might even show up on the board. And also, Métier Brewing, delicious beer, do you think? This is a brewery in Woodinville. It's the first time they've poured for us, so thank you so much, you guys back there. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And you know who else we really appreciate is KEXP. Every time. Okay, so one more reminder again before we get into some stuff. There's a raffle, so if you didn't do a raffle thing, put it in the back because there will be 2 lucky winners. You have to be here to win, so stay to the end so you can get that. Okay, what else? If you're not a member of the ACLU, we would love for you to join. It's actually cheap, it's actually easy, and it gets you right in line to get our action alerts and all kinds of vital information that'll help you to be in the fight with us for civil rights and civil liberties, because it is you with us fueling the fight of our lives. What else? Okay, so you know, since this current presidential administration, right, the ACLU nationwide has taken more than 177 different legal actions against the presidential administration. over 50 of them related to immigration, which is not going to be a giant surprise, but also many more in the areas of government accountability and transparency, women's rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, voting rights. Oh my gosh, voting rights? Yeah. Racial justice, free speech, using religion to discriminate. These are the kinds of lawsuits that we've been filing. And we're working in the courts, we're working in the legislature, and working at the ballot box. As I said, we're going to be down working in Olympia here pretty shortly. So while we're fighting these giant battles, right, which we're doing for every person in this country, regardless of what their status is, their gender, where they were born, right, we're fighting these. And these are challenges that we're fighting. So a couple of examples. One thing I wanted to share with you, and this is on the national level, right? So some of you may have heard about this. The Trump administration has proposed a really radical change to this longstanding public charge rule. So that was the rule that, and what he would like to do is enable the government to deny green cards to people simply because they are low income, or because their English proficiency doesn't meet a certain standard, or because they have poor credit, or large families, or health conditions. So, is that okay with you?
No.
Right, that's what I thought. So ACLU Washington and a lot of immigrant rights advocates across Washington and across the country are encouraging people to submit comments to this rule, and you can do so until December 10th. So we're going to be sending out an action alert about that to give you information on how to do it. So please be watching for that, and keep in mind that December 10th is the timeline on that. Okay, so meanwhile, in this context related to immigration, we have local police and jails, which are playing a really huge role in the deportation pipeline. In Washington, 50% of ICE arrests here took place outside of jails. So while we may not have a lot of control over what federal agents do, we can fight in our state and to keep our own local actors from collaborating with the president's cruel deportation agenda. So in 2019, the Washington State Legislature will consider a bill, the Keep Washington Working Act, that would prevent jails and police from wasting local resources on federal immigration enforcement, which they should not be doing. So it would keep ICE out of our jails and prohibit police from asking about immigration status. We hope you will also join us in getting that passed, okay? And help support other bills like that. So again, be on that e-activist list, because that's the way that we can communicate with you about what your opportunities are to make a difference. Okay, now, other aspects of this struggle are happening just a few miles from here at the Federal Immigration Detention Center in Tacoma. And tonight we're going to hear about the detention of immigrants by ICE, the private prison corporations, go ahead and boo, that profit from locking people up, and they profit mightily from it, and our lawsuits in support of people who are facing punishment and solitary confinement in retaliation for peacefully exercising their First Amendment right to protest conditions at the detention center, which are abysmal. So that means we also need to honor the memory of someone, which is Maru Mora Villalpando, who was a detainee at the Northwest Detention Center. He passed away earlier this week after participating in a hunger strike for 86 days. And while he was on that hunger strike at the detention center, they put him in solitary confinement, and his treatment and his death raised very serious concerns about what is happening in that place. About their medical negligence, their retaliatory treatment of hunger strikers and others in their facilities. So I just want to take a moment of silence in honor of Mr. Villalpando. So as we get into our conversation, we have some people who've been doing really important and vital work in this space. Really excited to have activist and undocumented immigrant Maru Mora Villalpando. And she is so awesome. She was born and raised in Mexico City, first came to the United States in the early 1990s to study and practice her English. And during one of her trips in '96, President Bill Clinton signed into law the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act that increased the consequences for people who had overstayed their visa. And she ended up facing a complicated choice, which became even more complicated because of a pregnancy. She did remain here in the US and has spent many years focusing on racial justice and immigrant rights, a powerful, powerful activist for all of us. Currently, she leads the Northwest Detention Center Resistance Group, where the group's main focus is to shut down the center while, shut it down, while gaining better treatment and conditions for all undocumented immigrants held there in the meantime. Unlike many other undocumented immigrants, she has been an outspoken activist and has been upfront about staying in the US after her tourist visa expired. And in December of last year, Immigration and Customs Enforcement put her in deportation hearings. Despite these challenges, she is undeterred and continues her advocacy work on behalf of so many people who are even less well situated than she is. And she was recently selected as the 2018 Globalist of the Year at the Seattle Globalist's 5th Globie Awards celebration. Now here's my favorite part. When asked how she would describe herself, she replied, single mom and community organizer. Also tonight we have Sharcorrie Tunkara, a Seattle resident, healthcare worker, and the mother of 2 beautiful children. She is the wife of Saja Tunkara, who was recently detained and deported from the Northwest Detention Center. Over the last few months, Sharcorrie battled to force ICE to provide adequate medical care to her husband during his detention. Her husband's case was profiled recently by the Seattle Weekly, where he spoke out against the abuses suffered by detainees at the center. And shortly after its publication, he was suddenly deported to Sierra Leone without a chance to even say goodbye to his family. And that is just not okay. So together with the Northwest Detention Center Resistance, Sharcorrie and their 2 beautiful children are fighting to bring their husband and father back to the United States. So we want to thank Maru and Sharcorrie for all of their work and for joining the panel tonight. And then also, of course, we have one of our amazing attorneys at the ACLU of Washington, Eunice Cho. Now, she's a staff attorney with us. She's had 20 years of experience in immigrant rights organizing and advocacy. Previously, she was a staff attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center's Immigrant Justice Project in Atlanta and at the National Employment Law Project Immigrant Worker Justice Project in Oakland, California. She gets around. For several years before becoming a lawyer, she was a community organizer herself at the National Network for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and is currently a National Steering Committee member of the Detention Watch Network. And boy, does detention need to be watched. And on the board of ASISTA, and was a National Steering Collective member of INCITE, Women of Color Against Violence. Eunice got her law degree with distinction from Stanford, graduated from Yale, and is a recipient of the Skadden Fellowship for Public Interest Law and a Soros Fellowship for New Americans. She was raised in Maricopa County, Arizona, where they also do an awesome job with immigrants, and is the proud daughter of immigrants from Korea, and she loves to play the drums in her spare time. So please welcome these 3 amazing women to the stage. I'm gonna let them do their thing, and you will finish up.
All right, good evening, you all. How are y'all doing? Good. I want to, before we start, please raise your hand if you've ever been to an immigrant detention center. For demonstration. And how many here have actually heard of an immigration detention center? Okay. So I'm really glad because oftentimes I'll go to spaces and people don't know about the fact that immigration detention centers actually exist. And worse yet, they've actually never been to one. And the tragedy is because we have immigration detention centers very close to where we are right now, less than an hour away in Tacoma, Washington. And so tonight I want to talk about immigration detention in the Trump era because immigration detention has existed in the United States for decades, but it has definitely gotten much, much, much worse under our current administration. So before I start, let's just go over some of the basics. Who can be detained by ICE? Any ideas? You can yell it out.
Anybody?
Anybody? That's pretty close. So who can be detained by ICE? Anyone who's not actually a U.S. citizen, although people who are U.S. citizens also get detained all the time. People who are documented and undocumented immigrants can be detained in ICE detention. And this includes all sorts of people. It includes people who are survivors of torture and abuse. It includes asylum seekers, people who are coming here for protection. It includes families. It includes children. It includes people with disabilities and serious illnesses. It includes people who are pregnant. Especially under the Trump era, this has gotten much worse. What we've seen is that under the Obama administration, there was a little room to try to get people out of detention if they had conditions that made it difficult for them to be detained, if there was a humanitarian concern. But what we're seeing is the doors slamming closed, especially under the Trump era, and this is something to be very concerned about. Another basic question, where are people detained? Where do you think people are detained?
Far from home.
Some good answers here. Everywhere, people are far from home. Yes, that's exactly right. So people are detained in every state in the United States, and they are detained in all sorts of facilities. This includes federal immigration detention centers. This includes privately run immigration detention centers. So they are detention facilities that look basically like jails that are run by private prison corporations. But this also includes a lot of other different kinds of facilities. This includes federal jails, so for example, SeaTac, very close to us. It includes children's shelters and homes. It includes county jails where the sheriff has signed an agreement with ICE. It includes temporary facilities at the border, both in the northern and the southern border, Canada and Mexico. It includes Bureau of Prison facilities that are designed to specifically hold immigrants. So federal prisoners who are non-citizens get held at special prisons, and mostly because of immigration-related offenses. So this includes people who have been deported and want to come back to the United States because their families are here and they get caught in the border. That's a criminal offense, and those folks get shifted into a federal prison that is exclusively for people who are non-citizens. And then now what we're seeing, and I'm sure many of you have heard, there are proposals to hold immigrants in Department of Defense facilities. These are facilities run by the military, and also tent cities in the middle of nowhere. One thing that's really special about immigration detention is that it is actually everywhere in every state. But one particular thing is that ICE actually has the power to move people around anywhere they want to. So even if you are brought in, if you live in Seattle and you are brought in to Tacoma, you can be transferred by ICE to any other facility in the country. And this is actually something that I saw when I worked in the South. I often worked with detainees in Alabama, and I would meet people who had been, who lived in New York or Seattle or Chicago, and they just got transferred down to Alabama, of all places, so far away from their families, so far away from their lawyers if they had anyone, far away from their loved ones, to the point where I've met people in detention who had not actually seen a visitor in years because they had been shipped away so far away. So these are all concerns that we have to think about very carefully when we think about immigration detention. So I want to look at immigration detention and the numbers. And one thing I really want to talk about is that immigration detention is not something that is inevitable. It is not something that has always been the case, and it's definitely something that we can end because it was not there before. So I want to look at the numbers. In 1994, the US government detained 6,000 immigrants a day. But by 2005, that number grew to 20,000 immigrant detainees every day. And in 2016, by the end of the Obama administration, this had increased to 34,000 people who were detained in immigration detention facilities every day. And I actually want to add a specific point about this, because who here has heard about the Immigration Bed Quota? Okay, a few of you. So what the Immigration Bed Quota is actually, it was a law that was written in an appropriations bill in Congress that was heavily lobbied for by private prison companies that said the US government must have 34,000 beds available for immigrant detainees every night. And so that meant that basically the government had to cover payment for 34,000 people detained every day. And if you think about this, what happens when you have a requirement to lock up a certain amount of people every day? You're going to find the people to fill those beds, right? And this is different from any other law enforcement agency in the entire country. There is no single jail where the sheriff is told, fill every single bed in this jail. Because you can imagine what would happen as a result of that, right? There would be a serious incentive for law enforcement to go out, find whoever they could, and keep them behind bars because they had this requirement to keep those beds filled. And that is exactly what happened with immigration detention. There was a requirement to have 34,000 beds by the end of the Obama administration. But what is worse is that this quota actually doesn't even matter anymore, because in the last 2 years under the Trump administration, the number of people detained has grown by over 50%. As of last month, the government detained over 44,000 people every night. And so what happens in Washington State, because we're here in Washington State? So every day there are nearly 2,000 immigrants that are detained by ICE in the state of Washington. The majority of these people are detained at the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, less than an hour away from where we are today. But it also includes people who are detained in other types of facilities. It includes people who are detained, for example, at the Yakima County Jail. There's 50 to 90 people who are detained there monthly. Other facilities like the Spokane County Jail. And the SeaTac Federal Detention Center, many of you might have heard, and many of you might have actually been there for protests. When we heard of the families being separated at the border, there was a wave of hundreds of detainees, including moms who were separated from their kids, who were being housed at a federal prison as a result of that expansion. And I want to just give props to our friends here from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project who valiantly started responding and representing a lot of those folks at the detention facility. Talk about another thing that is one of the most insidious parts of immigration detention, which is the funding. This is our money, this is our taxpayer dollars that is going to lock people up. So from fiscal year 2005 to today, there's been a steady increase in annual budget allocations to detain immigrants. And every single year, this amount has gone up without question, without check, without any pushback against the government. So DHS, the Department of Homeland Security's appropriate budget for immigration detention, enforcement, and removal has jumped by nearly $1 billion in the past 2 years. This is $1 billion. Think about how much money that is and what that could go to. Now, I just want to say how we're getting this money and what's going on with some of these dollars. So, as I talked about earlier, detention is accelerating under the Trump administration. Remember, we don't even need the quota anymore. The Trump administration is keeping people locked up longer. They're not using their discretion in terms of releasing people who might have humanitarian needs. But the other thing that is happening is that there's a lot of funny stuff going on with our money. First of all, ICE is repurposing contracts at the local level. They're expanding their infrastructure through the use of U.S. Marshal contracts. So they are forming contracts with different state agencies, with different sheriff's offices, and they're basically adjusting these contracts to reduce detention standards, gutting oversight bodies, and these lower standards are becoming the norm throughout the system. But the other thing is that money is being shifted from different sources to fund detention. So, for example, very recently, the Department of Homeland Security shifted $10 million from FEMA's operating budget. So, FEMA, these are the folks that are supposed to help us in terms of natural disasters, and they shifted $10 million from FEMA's operating budget to fund immigration detention and deportation in September, right at the same time that Hurricane Michael hit. And this is just a fraction of the redirection of the $200 million from all over Department of Homeland Security to ICE. So, for example, $93 million went to immigration detention, which paid to fund increased capacity of about 2,000 detainees, and money to pay for transportation and removal, right? So that's deportations. That's a 29% increase. And this money came from FEMA. It came from the offices that are supposed to counter weapons of mass destruction. It came from the Coast Guard. It came from TSA and the Cybersecurity Office, all to fund immigration detention. Now, this is a problem because all this money is going to accelerate immigration detention under the Trump administration. And what does this actually look like? What this looks like on the ground, it means that 5 times as many children are being detained under the Trump administration than before. So Under the Obama administration has nothing to be proud about this number. They detained 2,000 children every year. What's happening now? The Trump administration is now detaining 13,000 children in facilities. Detention is 50% higher than 2 years ago, so it increased from 34,000 people to 44,000 people per day. And the Trump administration is not stopping. The Trump administration is pushing to increase the number of immigration detention beds for immigrants from 52,000 to 52,000 people from 42,000 people in the 2019 budget for next year. So they're requesting an additional $2.8 million to fund this effort. I look then at what happens in the market. What is happening with the market for private prison corporations? So there are many private prison companies that operate in the United States, but the two key ones are the GEO Group Incorporated, which operates the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, and CoreCivic, which used to be called the Corrections Corporation of America, but they changed their name because that didn't sound as good. So what happened when on the day that, if you all remember what happened around family separations at the border, an ACLU lawsuit actually forced the government to stop that practice and enjoined the government from separating moms from their kids. But what happened was that the Trump administration said, well, fine, we're just going to detain the moms and the kids and all the families together. And on that day, that announcement was made, CoreCivic CEO Damon Hinginger said, this is probably the most robust kind of sales environment we've seen in probably 10 years. And I just want to run through some numbers about the private prison corporation's entanglement in our immigration detention system. So 60% of all immigrant detainees are actually held in a private facility. This is huge business for private prison corporations. And GEO and CoreCivic, those two largest prison companies I talked about earlier, they detain over 15,000 people per day in immigration detention center. These detainees made up 25% of CoreCivic's revenue in 2017, up from 13% a decade earlier, and that's the same numbers for the GEO Group as well. And a day after the Trump administration, the day after the election in 2016 when Trump won, GEO Group stock prices rose 21% that night, and CoreCivic stock soared by 43% that night. It was as if the market knew exactly what would happen. And the numbers are this. So in 2017, GEO received $184 million, and CoreCivic received $135 million for immigration detention. They receive about $150 per day per person. Think about this. What is the nicest hotel room you could get for $150 a night? And I want you to think about what we're going to hear about the Northwest Detention Centers very soon. And so what happens in immigration detention? What are we concerned about? Well, there are plenty of abuses that happen. And as Michele mentioned earlier, earlier this week, we saw the death of a Russian detainee at the Northwest Detention Center named Amar Morgansana. He was spending 86 days in solitary confinement, and he was in a solitary confinement cell when he was pulled out, taken to the hospital, and declared dead a few days later. We know that there have been many reports from other people who were in the same unit, in the same segregation unit as him, that said he had repeatedly asked for medical care that week. ICE is now claiming that it was a suicide. This is nothing new. In the last 10 years, there have been 179 detainees in ICE custody. And that is the worst thing that could happen to you. But there is plenty other abuses that happen in immigration detention centers. We know that detention centers are rife with inadequate medical and mental health care. I've received reports from people that say they've had chronic health conditions, and all they are told is to drink water and take a Tylenol. Mental health care, similarly, we've received reports of a man with severe schizophrenia who was locked in a solitary confinement cell for over 200 days, and his record says that he did not come out once to take a shower during that time. We have received reports of rampant physical, verbal abuse, sexual violence within detention centers, and punitive disciplinary procedures for, especially when detainees stand up for their rights and complain about conditions in the detention facilities. These conditions also include poor sanitation and food, forced labor and wage violations. There's actually a lawsuit against the GEO Group right now because detainees are being paid $1 a day to perform regular maintenance of the detention facility. So not only are they being locked up, they're being paid at less than poverty wages, $1 a day, to do things like paint the facility, clean the facility, cook, and basically keep the operations running. So not only is GEO avoiding paying workers the fair wage for keeping an operation, they're doing that on the backs of the very people that they're locking up. I want to talk a little bit about our lawsuit at against the Northwest Detention Center. So many of you may have heard of this case. It's Chavez Flores versus U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And this came about because of actually incredible work by groups like the Northwest Detention Center Resistance, who have been supporting immigrant detainees within the detention facility. And Jesus Chavez Flores, who is our client, was one of those brave individuals who participated in a hunger strike in February 2018. And there were hundreds of immigrant detainees who were actually going on hunger strike to protest conditions of confinement at the Northwest Detention Center. And Jesus was in his unit, and he was basically accused of being the ringleader of the hunger strike in his unit. And all of the witness accounts say that that is not actually the case. He was wrongfully pointed out as the leader of the hunger strike. But because of that role, he was immediately retaliated against. And what happened in that setting was that guards came and rushed into the unit and began assaulting immigrant detainees in that unit. And this included choking immigrant detainees, including pushing and slamming detainees against the wall, and in Mr. Chavez's case, including a punch to his face. Mr. Chavez was then falsely accused of violating the immigration detention rule, and then was placed in solitary confinement for 20 days without any due process in terms of his claim. So what we are doing as the ACLU, we are suing ICE and GEO to say that his First Amendment rights to freedom of speech to engage in a hunger strike have been violated, and to argue for damages because of the injury and the fact that he was locked up improperly for 20 days in solitary confinement. What is happening with this case? Well, it's very interesting. We have two defendants. We have GEO, the GEO Group, the private prison company, and ICE, the government agency who runs the detention facility as well. And what you'll see is ICE and GEO both have offices at the detention center, and they both sign off on use of force reports. They sign off on decisions to place people in detention. But one thing is really interesting that's happening in this case. They're pointing their fingers at one another and trying to disclaim any accountability or responsibility for this case. So what is the GEO Group saying? They're saying, we can't be responsible for these violations because we're not a government agency. How can we violate anyone's First Amendment rights? Well, there's plenty of very clear case law in the U.S. Supreme Court and out of the Ninth Circuit that say that when you have the responsibility, when you're performing the function of basically being a government agency, locking people up in immigration detention, you are a state actor for purposes of the First Amendment. And ICE is basically saying, we weren't involved. It was the guards that we hired, GEO, and it was the guards and those folks who locked people up and beat up Mr. Chavez. We're not the ones responsible, even though we know exactly what took place. We signed off on the use of force and we put him in detention. So what we're seeing is the potential for there to be a constitutional free zone because of the fact that the government has basically tried to contract out their responsibilities for locking people up in the first place. And our lawsuit is trying to stop that and making sure that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, and no matter whether you're in a facility that's run by a private prison company or not, you still have your First Amendment rights. So I think one thing that's really important to note is, what can you do? I'm so incredibly grateful to see so many people here tonight who are disturbed and angry about the fact that we're locking so many people up in immigration detention. And there are a few different ways that you can definitely help. One is to support detainees directly at the Northwest Detention Center. We have the Northwest Detention Center Resistance that Maru leads, and she will talk a lot more about that work. And I really encourage you to check them out, follow them on Facebook, go to their protests, and there are many ways in which you can be involved and support immigrant detainees directly. Also, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, the legal group who is actively representing hundreds of immigrants in immigration detention at Northwest Detention Center and beyond in the state of Washington every day. Also, NERP.org, please support them. On a more immediate basis, I encourage you to go to detentionwatchnetwork.org and join the Defund Hate campaign. And what that is this is an opportunity for us to actually stand up against ICE detention, the expansion of ICE detention, and tell our congresspeople, no more blank checks. No more blank checks to continually fund ICE detention. We are not going to give them a raise. We're not going to give them more money to lock more people up. We are going to stand up and make sure that they no longer have the money to keep on expanding the immigration detention machine. So go to www.detentionwatchnetwork.org and sign the petition there today. And as Michele talked about earlier, here in the state of Washington, support the Keep Washington Working bill, because that will actually help to turn off the spigot of immigrant detainees coming into immigration detention here in the state of Washington. So I just want to thank you very much for coming out today and hearing about some of the background facts around immigration detention. And I'm so pleased that Sharcorrie Tunkara and Maru Mora Villalpando are here tonight to really talk to you about their experiences of what happens in immigration detention, the things and the ways that we can directly support and fight against this immigration deportation machine. So thank you all tonight.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Sharcorrie Tunkara. I'm now an advocate with Northwest Detention Resistance. I was thrown into it. My husband was detained this year, January 9th. He was there for 10 months. Before he was detained, you know, he was working and everything, and we had the children, and I was stay-at-home mom. I worked, 2 days a week, and now I'm mom and dad. But before he was detained, we found out he had a tumor on the right side of his neck. He was scheduled for surgery mid-January, and then he was detained January 9th. So we did tell ICE, we did let them know that he had a surgery coming up. They knew about his tumor. They could visibly see his tumor because it was protruding from his neck. They did not take him to his surgery, and because of that, more medical ailments began to happen. I tried to contact them as much as I could. I tried to be involved as much as I could. I had no rights whatsoever to my husband or his medical records. I was treated as if I was a stranger asking for this person's personal, information. So after, fighting with them and connecting with the resistance group, I was able to get help with pushing them, and they finally did do surgery for him April 27th of this year. But I did not know about it. I didn't know when it was scheduled. I wasn't able to call him, talk to him. He was not able to call me or talk to me. When you are going for surgery, that's scary, especially anything that has to do with like your central nervous system, your heart, your brain, your neck. He was terrified. He told me he was scared. He was chained and bound the entire time he was there to the bed. The only time that he was not was when he was going to the restroom. And there was 2 guards with him at all times. And like I said, they wouldn't allow him to call me. I did call around to every hospital that I could possibly think of, from Tacoma to Seattle. I was told he was not in any of those places, which was not true. He was at UW the entire time, which I called like 3 times. After this, he was supposed to have like patient aftercare to do physical therapy on his arm because it had weakened because of the surgery. They didn't take all of the tumor out because part of the tumor was wrapped around nerve bundles. So they wanted him to regain his strength before deciding if they were going to take it out or not. That didn't happen either. He finally had physical therapy like 3 months later, and by that time his arm had healed and it was disabled. He then got asthma, hypertension, and lastly he began to go blind. So right now, like, he's losing his vision. And the doctor said that this is not something that could be done with surgery. It can't be corrected. It's going to happen, regardless. So during this entire time, my husband was like, you gotta make this public. Like, you have to figure out a way to make this where these people can be held accountable, because they are torturing us in here. And it's not just me, there's many others as well. So we did a press release for him, and we gave it out to different media groups, and Seattle Weekly picked up the story. I did a story on Como 4, Univision, as well as Cairo 7. But Seattle Weekly was really like the engine behind getting the story out. She worked really hard on that story. I think it was like four months that she did all her research and was contacting other people inside the detention who was suffering. Amar, the guy that passed away, was one of the people who were suffering. He didn't want to go public with it, but he was suffering from medical illnesses too. So ICE not having a boss or anybody to hold them accountable, they can hide. They kidnapped my husband. They held him hostage for me. That's what it's like. It's like watching a horrible horror film and the kids in the basement can't scream for help. They're in the basement hollering, but can't nobody hear them. There's nobody to help them. And I felt helpless because as a wife, I'm supposed to have rights, right? When you say I'm your wife or I'm this person's spouse, everything stops. This is the spouse. No, not in this case, not in this situation. They wouldn't be honest with me when I spoke with them. They wouldn't tell me anything about his medical stuff. They would say, well, we don't have anything to do with medical. That's a separate thing. But the medical department are all ICE employees. So about that. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the facility as a whole. So while my husband was there was an outbreak of varicella twice. He had chickenpox. By the way, he was deported. He had chickenpox while he was deported. And then mumps is also running rampant right now in the detention center. But I want to talk about the Seattle Weekly article because I think that was the engine behind the reason that he did get deported. So after the article was released, he was getting taunted by ICE. They would pull him into intake, which is where they go when they want to talk to you, right? They would ask him questions like, do you have family? Where did you work before you came here? Where did your wife work? What's the address? And all those kind of things. And so my husband called me and he was like, I really feel weird about this. Like, I think something's gonna happen. I need you to pack my stuff. You've been there this long. I don't know, like that's not gonna happen. We're still fighting. It's not gonna happen. He's like, no, you gotta pack my stuff. So I did what he said. I didn't personally pack his things. I had a best friend do it. I couldn't pack his stuff away like that. So he came and packed his things. And during that, weeks after the Seattle Weekly was released, we went hard with his campaign. We did a petition. We had people doing petitions. We had a call to action where we have people, residents call and complain. They call their local office members and say, we know about this person. We know that this and this is happening. Have him released. And all I was asking for was have him released while he's fighting his case so that he can get healthy. But instead of that happening, they left him in there to die. He kept getting worse and worse and worse, and they all do. You can't be healthy in that place. It's completely toxic. He didn't even have water to drink. He refused to drink that water because he said it had black dots in the water. So I said, babe, why don't you just order a bottle of water off of commissary? He was like, I would if they offered it. They have soda. Then he didn't have clean clothes. So if he didn't have clean clothes, because they wouldn't do laundry, he'd use the bar soap to clean his clothes, right? Then he'd run out of soap for that, and they're like, hey, I ran out of soap, we need more soap. They say, well, sorry, you're gonna have to wait until the next shipment comes. So that means they're not showering or washing their hands, and there's varicella and mumps going around this facility. Not to mention the workers who are going in there unprotected, right? Then they go home to their loved ones and their children, and then they go to work and go to school. But that's not a concern. My husband, I really, really admire him for standing up the way that he did because he definitely was in jeopardy. The phone calls that we had were recorded. We could hear the tapping on the phone, and you know it's being recorded. But I had somebody tell me one time, like, how do you know that's retaliation? Okay, let's talk about it. They didn't allow us to say bye to each other. So when my husband first got the scare that he was going to be deported, maybe, I went and spoke with his ICE officer face to face. He told me two things. The first thing was they didn't have a travel document, so they can't deport him. The second thing was that I would have the opportunity, if he was to be deported, to say bye. So they would set up, thank you. They would set up a, excuse me. Ooh, thank you. So they would have, you have to apply for a contact visit. So contact visit is when you're not behind a glass, you can touch your family, you can, kiss and hug on your kids and stuff like that. And I think the visit is longer, it's 2 hours instead of 1. But in order to have that, you have to apply for it. So they told us the only way that would happen is if my husband had a deportation date. So 2 weeks before he was deported, I spoke with his ICE officer face to face. He told me he didn't have any paperwork. My husband was gonna be fine for the moment, like all these things. And then 2 weeks later, he's just gone. So without telling me anything, without allowing us to say goodbye. So the day he was deported, I got a phone call at 4 a.m. The number was private. They called 3 times. I didn't answer the first 2 times because I'm like, who's calling me at 4 in the morning? It's private and I gotta go to work tomorrow. So the third time I was just like, let me answer. So I answered. The guy's like, this is a ICE officer, didn't say his name. This is an ICE officer. We're in Tukwila and we have your husband here. What do you mean he's in Tukwila? He's supposed to be in Tacoma, in the jail. What do you mean I don't understand. Well, he's being deported today. You have less than an hour to bring his things and any money that you're gonna put on his books. What? Okay. So I have to wake my children up 4 a.m., tell them to get their coats and stuff on. So we, go into the door, I'm grabbing his luggage. My kids are crying. Mommy, what are you doing with daddy's stuff? I'm like, daddy's leaving. He's gonna be deported? Yeah. So, everybody, crying. We go to the Tukwila facility. Have you guys seen, where the Tukwila facility is? The USCIS building where you're supposed to do paperwork? It's just supposed to be a processing area. Well, obviously they hold people there too. I drove there. There were 3 officers waiting for me outside. They didn't even ask where I was when I pulled up. They, just was there waiting. So I pull up. One greets me and she's like, sorry, we have to meet under these circumstances, like blah, blah. And I'm just looking at her like, please shut up, lady. You got to deport my husband. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. So I get out the car. Before that, I go to the bank and empty out my account and just give my husband whatever that I had. This was before payday, so kind of broke, but I had to do it. I had to give him whatever he could have to survive. So I get out, I give her the money, I get his luggage out the back seat. While I'm doing that, they're talking to me about how this is against policy. They're not supposed to call me and ask me to bring funds or his luggage. We should have done that in the Tacoma facility, as if they're doing me a favor. Like, we could avoid all of this right now and just let him out and I'll take him right on home. Solve that problem for you. So I give him the luggage, he picks it up. He's like, oh no, this is too heavy. You're gonna have to take some of his stuff out of here. So I'm like, are you okay? It's 4 o'clock in the morning, okay. So I go and I start taking his stuff out. And the whole time he's telling me how he's doing me a favor. They're not even supposed to call me and tell me this, to come up here and do all this stuff. So the other ICE officer stops me and she's like, it's okay. Just, put stuff back. We'll figure it out. Like, don't worry. And he's like, no, they're gonna charge us extra for his luggage being too heavy. Insult to injury, right? So the kids are crying in the car. I'm just like, whatever about that. So I asked them, can you please let me say bye to my husband? Let me see him. Let us talk to him. Let my children say bye to him at least. And they're like, no, you should have did that in the Tacoma facility. We don't do that here. So I said, okay, can I at least have his flight information? Like, when is his plane gonna land? all those things. They tell me, why are you gonna meet him there? I'm like, no. Are you gonna have somebody meet him there? I'm like, possibly. I wanna know so that I can make sure he's secure when he gets there. So that, I can make sure nothing happens to him. He's like, well, we don't know any of that information, and even if we did, we wouldn't tell you. Okay. Last thing they said to me, I asked them, so now what's gonna happen? Like, I'm not gonna be able to talk to him. Can he call me on the phone? And they're like, yeah, like the guys that's gonna take him over there, they're gonna be nice. They have cell phones. He can call. We'll have him call you before he leaves America. I didn't get any phone calls for 2 days. I had no clue where my husband was. Not a clue. I didn't know if the plane crashed, if it got hijacked. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. And for those days, I was so sick physically. Like, my face went numb. I thought I was having a stroke. It was that bad. My stress level was extremely high. And all because my husband wasn't born here. That was because he wasn't born here and because he fought against what was being done to him and other people inside, which he's supposed to do. Who wouldn't do that? I'm dying in this facility and you're gonna let it happen? No. So that just goes to speak about our situation and what happened to us and how traumatic that was. But even worse, the power that ICE has over someone's being, over my life, literally. They have other options to let people out and do like a probational type of thing where you can check in and stuff. They had every option to, they could have done that if they wanted to. And they chose not to be evil and to retaliate. So I'm not gonna let this continue to happen. I'm not gonna let them bully us. I'm not gonna let them bully the people inside the detention center or any other facility if I know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharcorrie. Our next speaker is going to be Maru Mora Villalpando, but before she comes to speak, we're going to play a quick video that her group, the Northwest Detention Resistance, has put together about the facility.
The Northwest Detention Center is an immigration prison in Tacoma, Washington. It is owned and managed by the company Geo Group for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In its 1,575 beds, it holds adults collected from streets, homes, and workplaces in the Northwest. Non-citizens transferred from jails and prisons, and asylum seekers transferred from the border. The detention center is part of a racist institution that targets people of color, dehumanizes, and exploits. To start, ICE receives policy guidance and budget appropriations to arrest and detain from lawmakers. Lobbyists and politicians with a detention center in district ensure that the conditions for arrest and detention expand. ICE forms contracts with prison companies, jails, and other government agencies for bed space to hold those in deportation proceedings. At the Northwest Detention Center, ICE is contracted to pay between $101.67 and $119.53 per person per day. ICE also pays Geo Group for transportation and for detained people's wages. In 2016, Geo Group's revenue in Tacoma was $61.8 million. Geo Group relies on the people detained to run the facility. These people prepare and distribute food, clean living spaces and bathrooms, sort and distribute laundry, buff floors, paint walls, cut hair, and more. They are paid $1 a day. According to Geo Group, in 2016, there were 157,913 shifts worked. Assuming that otherwise, they would pay the minimum wage, Geo Group saved at least $10.4 million. That's a nearly 17% bump in their Tacoma revenue. People detained work to buy things they need: phone calls, food to supplement the bland and sometimes spoiled meals, shampoo, soap. These are all overpriced in detention. Others refuse to work, saying it is slavery. There are stories of people coerced to work when not enough workers have signed up. Other businesses outside detention prey off of people detained and their loved ones. Some lawyers provide substandard representation or disappear after collecting payment. Bond companies charge extreme fees. People pay because they need freedom. The detention economy hinges on the gap between what humans need and the subhuman standards that detention provides. Unmet human need is a resource. People will spend money to meet those needs and work for that money. But people inside fight back, and they have connected with people on the outside who fight alongside them. They need all our support.
Buenas noches. My name is Maru Mora Villalpando. I'm a co-founder of NWDC Resistance, or La Resistencia as we know it. I want to start by saying that everything that Sharcorrie said really summarizes our work. Sharcorrie texted me one day, and we started working together. And that's what we do. When people ask us if we can help, we say no. We don't help, we collaborate. It's very different. Because we don't want to assume that others need us. We want to assume that because we are just people, and we don't have money, and we don't have political power, at least we are at the same level. And we don't want to offer charity or to assume that we can save others. We assume that liberation comes together by working together, by collaborating. We have a clear goal. We are an abolitionist movement. We want NWDC shut down, and every single place like that in the United States to be shut down. That's all we want. As it was mentioned before, Amar Merganzana passed away last week. It's even hard to describe at what point he actually died. We have been in touch with him since late September. We find out about him through other hunger strikers. This year, we saw several hunger strikes. Since 2014, as we came together as a group, we have a count of 15, that's 15 hunger strikes that we know of. We came together in 2014 because some of us in 2013 were tired of playing the policy games that are being played here in the US. We were tired of being used either as scapegoats or political balls in the policy game. We were tired of going to the congressional delegations, or even going to DC or here in Washington State and trying to pass good policy. We got tired of asking for quote-unquote comprehensive immigration reform. Because every time we got to play the game with them, the more we learned, the more we realized we were being used. And that whatever comprehensive immigration reform meant to policy and politicians didn't mean what we were looking for or what we deserved. We were being used. So several of us said enough is enough, and by 2013 we started joining direct actions. We joined actions alongside with many other undocumented people throughout the nation. But we decided that we had to do a direct action against the Northwest Detention Center here in Washington State, because people have this wrong idea that this is a progressive state. People that have this wrong idea that this is a welcoming, quote-unquote, state to immigrants. It's all a parade. It's BS. And I believe this is a place of freedom of speech. I'm going to say it's bullshit. So we came together and we decided to do a shutdown action on February 24 of 2014. What we didn't expect is that we were actually being in contact with people detained that were being transported that day. So some people being transported in one of the vans that we stopped saw us and they waved at us. And that's the moment that all the fear went away and we said, this is worth it. This is why we had to do it. So as an undocumented immigrant, I was putting myself on the risk of arrest and deportation. And it was like, this is why we had to do this. We knew there was a higher reason for shutting down the detention center. What we didn't know it was that a week and a half later, we would get a call saying that 1,200 people had decided to go on hunger strike and they needed our help. So we responded that call saying, we don't help, we collaborate. How do we do this together? And since then, we've been working directly with people detained, following their leadership. We don't question people in detention, we question ICE. We don't judge people in detention, we judge ICE. That's our job, and I think we do it pretty well. So much that ICE has retaliated against and again and again and again against hunger strikers. You heard some of the stories. I think a very clear example is precisely Amar. Amar joined the hunger strike on August 23rd, after a couple of days that the national prison strike had started. The national prison strike, we're asking, is people in NWDC joining? And as we ask people in NWDC, are you joining? They say, fuck yeah. So they started. So we started supporting. So from August 23rd to September 21st to September 9 that this strike happened in many different places, not only in the US, but actually in Canada, prison in Canada also joined. We thought, okay, this is it. But then it turns out we found more people that heard a hunger strike is happening. We're gonna join because we're sick and tired of being treated this way, because we don't wanna be here, because we deserve to be free. And it turns out that we start working with more and more people, and the group that continued the longest was a group of men from Russia. So we started a long, tiring campaign of everyday calls to actions, every day. We're counting not days, but weeks of hunger strike. And at the end, it was just Amar. Amar came to our attention after the other people on hunger strike had decided to stop. We said, okay, this is it, this is the end of the hunger strike. And they say, no, actually there's still a guy on hunger strike. So we went and met Amar. Amar was very determined. He always told us, I'm not gonna stop until I'm free. I'm afraid of going back. I'd rather die here. Last time we saw him was on November 3rd. He looked really tired. He looked really weak, but still determined to continue. He had told us that he was still drinking the Pedialyte, which, by the way, we learned that ICE had gotten a court order to force hydrate him. We had tried so many things, and we realized the law is totally against us. The law is totally against Amar. We cannot rely on the law. Again and again, we try to reach to the law side. It's clear, law is not about justice, it's just about power, and we don't have that power. So the only kind of power we can have is the people power, so we're gonna continue ahead with public pressure. And so, Jason said last time we saw him, I'm drinking the Pedialyte, but next week, that's it. I'm gonna just go back to water. I'm not gonna stop. On November 15, we get a call from a person right next to him on a solitary confinement cell. When people call us from the detention center, you can tell immediately they're in a solitary confinement cell because there's an echo to it. And this guy says, remember the Asian guy? Because that's how they knew him. Most of the people in the solitary confinement cell on this area are Mexicanos or Salvadoreños, they're Latinx. And he says, remember the Asian guy? He died. I've been calling you all day, you don't pick up the phone, what's going on? I was like, what? We knew that ambulances had been there, the police had been there, we even had pictures. And then we started to realize, yeah, something really bad happened. We had to make a decision. What do? We don't have all the information, that's for sure. The only one that has the whole picture here is ICE, and they're not gonna tell us anything. They never say anything. They always hide. That's how they operate. They hide, they're not accountable to anybody, and our only tool is public pressure, so we had to go public. We had to announce the news that we had. And that pushed ICE to actually reply and say, oh, well, we have somebody in the hospital. But if it hadn't been because This witness said, you have to make it public. People need to know what happened to Amar. And because we knew there wouldn't be other way to get ICE on the record, we had to do it. And so we did. And so since November 15 till Sunday, it had been a really, really, really difficult time for all of us. Because nobody deserves to die alone. And that's exactly what happened to Amar. That's exactly what has happened to hundreds of people under ICE custody. Amar is not alone. There's been others. Recently, Roxanne Hernandez's autopsy, a trans woman that also came to the US asking for asylum, was beat up at the detention center that she was at, where she also died. How many other people need to die? I think it's plenty. I think we sacrifice too much. And when we say that we need to abolish ISIS, it's not a joke. It's not a hashtag. It's not for politicians to use and feel themselves good about themselves and run with this nice platform. And when the time comes, they back off. And they're like, actually, what we meant is reform. Well, what we meant is these other priorities are more important. It's boring. It's not. It's people's lives. And again, if it hadn't been for this witness, nobody would have known right now about Amar. Because ICE was trying to hide it. And ICE again and again keeps lying. That's what they did. They're even changing Amar's names. They're saying, no, Amar was the last name. That's not his name. That's a last name. I got another call the other day from the detention center saying that an entire pod is sick with the flu. An entire pod. Not only the chicken pox, the mumps, retaliation, sending people to solitary confinement. Everybody's getting sick in there. Everybody. There's always horrible stories that we keep listening. An entire pod during the hunger strike was sent to solitary confinement. They ran out of space, so they moved people to another place. At least 6 people out of that pod are still on solitary confinement indefinitely. Because Gio said so. Gio and ICE keep doing that. No, it's not my fault, it's their fault. No, it's not my fault, it's not their fault. Brian Wilcox is an ICE field director here in Seattle. And I was in a meeting where he was at in 2016. And I asked him and another guy from ICE, I can't remember his name. I asked them, so who makes the decisions in NWDC? Because we've seen this, we've seen that, so who's in charge here? And they got angry at me, and they're like, we do. Gio does what we tell them to do. So we actually took the quote down and we sent it into the detention center. So every time Gio says, no, it's ICE, well, yes, it is ICE. And every time ICE tells you, no, it's not us, well, Brian Wilcox said, it is them. But, both Gio and ICE just want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to get away with it. And we're sick and tired of that, and we're doing something about it. So there's many things we can ask you to do. Like Sharcorrie said, she didn't get to say goodbye. And we think that's really humiliating. And they do it to hurt people. See, ICE was created with the intention of hurting us, immigrants, and to really destroy our communities. They're coming after us. And they've done it since day one. This is not only about Trump. Trump is not the problem, it's the symptom. This was built before Trump. Trump is just utilizing it. And ICE is happy to have somebody like Trump. Because they can do whatever they wanted to do before. They were doing it, but not as much. Now they can do whatever they want. And so what they did to Sharcorrie was to say, we could have, but we don't want you. We don't want you to talk to him. We don't want him to say goodbye to you. We have a fundraiser for Sharcorrie. If you go to our Facebook page, NWDC Resistance, we have a fundraiser because we want her to go and meet with her husband. And we want her children to spend Christmas with him. They deserve that and more. But if we can at least give them that, I think we should. because we are also responsible that this is still happening today. We have let it happen. We have normalized it. It is on us to. We have what we call Solidarity Days at NWDC, but also CTAC, because not because we have no more mothers there in CTAC doesn't mean that there's nobody there. The place is not empty. If it was empty, then we will be happy, but it's not. There's still people there. So we need to fight that. So we ask you to join us on Solidarity Days that we do at CTAC and NWDC. We're asking you to do things. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, and I bet most of you are on social media, and most people start their days posting something, we ask you that your first post tomorrow should be, Amar, rest in power. And then we ask you to join us on calls to actions that we'll have on our Facebook to ask for an independent investigation. ICE does this again and again. They have killed people, they investigate themselves, and then it turns out nothing happened. They're innocent. Those don't sound familiar? It's enforcement, right? Regular enforcement. They go, they kill people, nothing happened. We're innocent. So we're asking Washington State to do an independent investigation. We think and we believe that we're gonna win. I'm gonna give you a good example. GEO's buses, where they transport people, they don't have a logo anymore. They don't. Why do you think that is? They're hiding. I bet you that people that were driving next to them on the freeway were flipping their fingers to them. I bet you that was happening. And so it works, right? That's all we have, public pressure. Again, we're all volunteers at NWDC Resistance. We don't have money. We don't have lawyers. We don't have, that's it. We don't have a staff. We all do it whenever we can, and somehow we have managed, and we're awesome at what we do. We're really great at community organizers. Now imagine if we have more of us, and that's what we're asking you. We're asking you to come and support, not to help. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to collaborate with us, and don't forget the calls to action. Don't forget tomorrow morning your first post should be Amar, rest in power. Thank you.
So I want to thank all three of you for telling the truth about what's happening, about really the inhumanity as well as the illegality of what's going on. And greatly appreciative as well for resource information on how people can engage with this and help. So we probably have time for just one or two questions. So if there are